Hello, 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 and welcome. I am so happy to have you guys here. We're going to have a good time tonight. Tonight, we are going to talk about how to be a good podcast guest. This is not going to be the advice that you get about showing up prepared and like all this like vague advice. I'm going to give you some specific actionable things that you can do that is going to ensure that you not only show up and have a good conversation, but you'll have a converting conversation. Um, who am I? My name is Carolee Moore. I'm the founder and CEO of the Podcast Pitching Society, where we help experts just like you to land qualified leads and to also grow your visibility using other people's podcasts. I have done that for, at this point, dozens of experts, and I've also done it for myself. I have taught other people and I've done myself how to land 5-figure contracts using other people's podcasts and other people's platforms. And that is actually why I will be hosting a free masterclass on August 20th of the same name, right? Your first 5-figure podcast guest feature. That masterclass is going to break down in a lot more detail what I'm about to talk about tonight. But I really want to make sure that as you're doing these podcasts, that you're not just winging this thing. And a lot of folks are doing that. The first thing I want to say to set the scene and to basically share with you my philosophy when it comes to podcasting and podcast guesting is that you're going on a stage. Every single podcast interview that you do is a stage. And you would not go on somebody's stage that has hundreds of people in the audience and thousands of people in the audience, especially if they're recording it and sending it to social media. After that, you would not be winging those presentations. And so I want you to make sure that you're not doing that for your podcast interviews either. It's really unfortunate, but I see it a lot. And so I want to, with that frame of mind, I want you to think about this as even like mini keynotes as you're going and having these conversations with people on the podcast. That's what this is. You are preparing mini keynotes. So let's get into this, right? If we're thinking about a keynote and we're thinking about a podcast interview, it's kind of the same thing. You start off your keynote, if you're a keynote speaker, with what? A little introduction of yourself. And you do that in creative ways. You're not going to just kind of say, hey, my name is Carolee, in a, what is it called? AA meeting. Hey, my name is Carolee. And this is, no, you're going in with humor, you're going in with relatability, and you're more than likely going in with a story. You're going in with a story that immediately hooks your audience. And so now they're like this, trying to figure, okay, let me hear what else is coming down the pipe, right? That's what you want to do in your podcast interviews as well, because it is kind of like a keynote. So what is the first question that you're going to get asked on almost every single podcast, unless the host is like not great? You're going to be asked to introduce yourself, right? And it might be framed, or it will be framed in a ton of different ways. But as almost always, the first question. And that first question gets people in trouble. Why is that? I've seen it as being a podcaster myself and also being a guest myself. I've seen it a lot. You either have the people who are like, yeah, I'm great, I'm awesome, like whatever, like very nonchalant, very like whatever about it, to the point where you're like, oh, why are you even on this podcast right now? And then there are the people who cannot shut up. They're talking for like 10 minutes to introduce themselves. And what's worse is a lot of times by the end of that 10 minutes, you're still like, so what do you do? And that is a problem. So let's talk about your introduction, because that is a huge part of how to be a memorable podcast guest. Your introduction should be 3 parts. It should be 1, filled with personality. You don't have to be quote unquote funny if that's not you. Like I'm not like a ha ha, let me randomly tell a joke kind of funny. I'm the observant, like we're all looking at the same thing and I can kind of come up with something witty to say what everyone will laugh about the thing that we're all looking at. I'm not the create a joke and tell you the joke person. I'm just not. So when you're starting, you have to kind of find wherever your comfort spot is with that, but you have to show personality. One of the things that I talk to my clients about as they're going into their interviews, as it relates to this intro piece, is hey, make sure that your voice is not, and I just go here and I'm just doing this and this is the entire time when you're introducing yourself, right? Because at the end of the day, who's going to want to listen to a 45-minute interview after the first 2 minutes is just like dry, like bone dry, right? Where it's pretty much the exact same monotone, whatever, the entire time. You want to put some, personality in your voice. And if it's video, it's even better because then you can use your hands, you can use your facial expressions, you can use multiple things to get people to be engaged in what you are saying, right? I, for whatever reason, I don't know, I'm gonna blame it on being Jamaican, right? I talk with my hands and with my whole body, as you just saw, like with the and as long as you're not being extra, that actually can help you to really clue in on who you're engaging with. You will start to see the podcast hosts themselves like kind of lean in a little bit as you're using your body for that, right? So you definitely want to make sure that your levels are there, right? You're giving all the personality in the beginning. You also want to make sure that your story is straight and straight in all the ways, meaning people can follow your story. And it happens to me sometimes. It happens to most of us sometimes where you're talking and then you're talking and then you're talking and then you forget what you're talking about. Right? And that has happened. That has happened to the best of us. And unfortunately, I've heard it and I've seen it happen to people when they're supposed to be introducing themselves for the first time on a podcast. So you want to make sure that your story is completely straight. There is a beginning, a middle, and an end. Bonus points if you can create a thread that is pretty much a thing that you connect from the early part of your life that has been a through line throughout. One of the things that I do when I am doing podcasts and doing that intro, I talk about storytelling. That is my thread. I enjoy storytelling. It is also part of my culture. It's a part of how I actually got more familiar, or I guess ingrained in the American culture when I moved here, was all through stories. And so every single part, and then I majored in communications in college, every single part of my story hitched on storytelling. And so by the time I'm done, by the time I get to, hey, this is what we do as an agency, and this is what I do as the CEO, and this is my part of the delivery where I help other people with storytelling, it all makes sense because I've just now taken you through my entire life story with that same thread. So by the time that 2 or 3 minutes is over, you fully understand what I bring to the table. And that takes me to that third piece, which is your expertise, right? You have personality, you have your story, you have your expertise / your offer. Those are the things. And it is a skill to figure out how to meld all that together to introduce yourself in the beginning of a podcast. So that's how we help our clients. Every single time they're about to go on a podcast, they sit with me and we walk through that. That is the value of having someone there with you, right? And that is what I'm going to do on a masterclass on August 20th to people who are VIP anyways, because those are the folks that are going to be able to come off mute and ask me questions. And we could literally have a coaching session in the middle of a masterclass. If that is something that you're interested in, if you've been doing podcasts and you've been introducing yourself, but now you've heard my framework and you're like, I haven't been doing it like that. And I would love to like figure out how mine would sound using that framework. You definitely don't want to miss this masterclass. For sure. It's going to be super helpful for you. The next thing that you want to kind of hone in on when it comes to being a really memorable guest is what I call ESO. And I hinted toward it a little bit because your ESO is actually a part of your introduction as well. But your ESO is the way that you should answer almost every single question you're being asked during your interview. What is ESO, Carolee? ESO is your expertise, your story, and your offer. Another way that we put it is your PowerPoint. ESO together equals your PowerPoint. They're kind of three strands, or as I like to call it, because I'm a fat kid in a skinny girl's body, it's the cake method. It's the thing that at the base of everything is always your expertise. You can't build on shaky things. And so if you're not really an expert and you're trying to kind of come off as one, I don't know what to do with you. I don't know what to do. We only work with experts. The only thing I know is how to help someone who actually knows what they're talking about. I'm sorry. So your expertise is the foundation. What's built on top of that expertise is the stories that you tell. These could be case studies or specific stories from your life, etc., that are tied to your expertise. But what makes that PowerPoint a PowerPoint and not just a talking point is now tying it to your offer. And this is the part that I think a lot of people either skip because they don't know how to or completely forget to do, is ensuring that your offer is present throughout your entire interview. It is not an easy thing to do without sounding incredibly salesy and ridiculous. Okay? And a lot of people, as soon as I say sales and podcasts, it creates this, you're either cringing, like, ugh, you should not go on a podcast to sell. If you are in business and you are on any platform that is taking your time away from delivering for your customers or your clients, honey, you should be selling. Okay? I'm just going to be honest. There is nothing else that I'm going to do. You taking me away from delivering for my clients. I'm not just going to be coming up here having a good conversation. Absolutely not. Yes, I want to add value to your audience. Yes, I want to make sure that there's personality, there's all the things, but I'm definitely going, like Denzel Washington said, I'm going to leave here with something. And that something's going to be some leads. That something's going to be some invitations to speak somewhere, that like we leave it here with something. And that piece is going to ensure that you do that. The piece is your offer. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where people literally the first time that they're mentioning their offer is at the end of the conversation. The first time that people even know what you offer is the final 10 seconds of the podcast. Where they do that at? Not over here. Not a part of the podcast pitching society, honey. We don't play that. It's not about turning these people's platforms into, a ginormous sales pitch. No, you are still there to offer value, to educate, and to impact. That is always number one. But I'm going to be honest. I don't see the purpose of doing any of that. Any work that you're doing for marketing, whether that is posting on somebody's social media somewhere, or going on a podcast, or writing a blog, or what, any of that, if it's not for the sole purpose of getting people to know that you exist and and understand what the solutions are that you offer, and giving them a way to actually get into your world, or you're on your calendar, or purchase your what, then what are we doing here? Are you really in business? So if you're watching this and you have been podcast guesting and doing all of the things and seeing absolutely no results when it comes to leads, it is not the podcast, it is you. Because one, you should be picking better podcasts and more aligned podcasts, and you have to work on your messaging. And your messaging, as I said, is the ESO, right? Your expertise, your stories, and your offer. And when you say those things, you always want to go with, what was the problem? Like, where did I come into the life of the client that I'm talking about, right? If I came into the life, one of my star clients, as I call her, she found me through someone else's podcast, came in, first sales meeting that we had. She said, I absolutely want to do this. Give me a day. Give her a day, followed up. She signed up within that day. And we pretty much made a game plan. She is in consulting space. She wants to be considered a thought leader in that space. And so we decided to go all out with the level and caliber of podcast that we were pitching her for. And we went super, super deep in podcast prepping, right? And so during that podcast prepping session, we went through her introduction. We went through all of the different case studies that she could use, and the specificity of her case studies, right? Where it wasn't just like, oh yeah, I do this for my clients. It's, hey, no, this particular client of mine had this problem. We worked together and did these things. And then this was the result. And here is the reason why these results were not abnormal, right? Here is the reason why these results are tied to the thing I believe. Here is the reason why these results are really important for you, hey, the listener. Tie it back to all kinds of things and then keep it rolling. That whole entire process has landed that particular client multiple 5-figure contracts. Clock it. So, and she has not been on like crazy huge podcasts. There's probably 2 or 3 podcasts that were fairly large that we've gotten her on, right? But she has been on a bunch of different size podcasts, tiny ones, medium-sized ones, and multiple contracts and multiple invitations to come back because she has been that good of a guest. So when I tell you it's not the podcast, I'm not saying it's necessarily you. It's that the package isn't quite there yet, which is, again, why this masterclass on August 20th is going to be a game changer. If you are ready to genuinely like generate some revenue from your podcast guesting, this is a masterclass for you. Now, can I promise that you're going to make money from every single podcast that you appear on? Absolutely not. I haven't made money from every single podcast that I've appeared on. But the ones that were, slam dunk right fit, I made sure before I got on there, I prepped myself. I got my stuff, like I was in there. My actual stories, just like the story I just told you, you got to have them ready to play them, right? Because that's when people start, when they are able to see themselves in your stories and in your results, then they'll get the, okay, I need to go and find this person. It's as simple as that. Right? Well, it's not simple. Or should I say it's simple, but it's not easy. There it is. Okay. last but certainly not least, and this is really important. This, I'm sure if you're a podcaster listening to this, you're going to be like, yes, thank you for saying this because I can't. This third one is promote the episode. Promote the episode. Share the episode. Don't just, oh, that was great. That was awesome. I loved it. Perfect. Right? You have to actually listen. I can't say have to. Do whatever you want to do. If you want to be a memorable podcast guest, one that is invited back, one that has a relationship with the podcast host beyond just being, hey, I was a guest on your podcast, but you can prolong that relationship to get referrals and all the others. If you want that and not just, hey, another opportunity, promote the episode. Make sure that you are actually helping that podcast host put some legs on that episode. They will love you for it because statistically, only around 10% of the people that actually appear on podcasts promote their episode after it's done. 10%. It is very easy not to be mediocre in this situation, right? Very easy. 10%? Come on now. You can do it. And I'm not talking about the one little reshare of whatever they posted. Be like, okay, great. That's awesome. We're done. I'll tell you this. The one podcast where I'm almost at 100K just from this one podcast episode. I'm a firm believer that a part of the reason I was able to extend the amount of life for that actual podcast episode and make as much as I did from it is because I spent close to 2 weeks after the podcast had aired. The Jamaican had aired. Good Lord. I spent almost 2 weeks promoting the living bejesus out of this episode. Reels, honey, blog posts, email, everywhere I posted about that episode. And yeah, because I knew it was going to be a game changer. I knew the audience of the podcast was ripe. I mean, majority of them were my ideal clients. So why would I not push? Because here's the thing. When someone listens to a podcast and they come and try to find you, right? And they see, especially in my business, if I'm telling you, hey, prepare for the podcast, make sure you're doing all this stuff. And then you go and listen to one of my episodes, you're like, girl, what? Yeah. And if I'm telling you to go and actually promote this podcast, and you go on my socials and you're like, well, I ain't seen no promotion in none of your podcasts on here. Like, what's the deal? But that's literally my business, not to quote Tabitha Brown. For you, even though it's not your business, you're not a podcaster necessarily. And if you are, shame on you if you're not actually doing that for other people, because I know that you would want to do that. You want people to do that for your show. But even if you're not a podcaster, you have to kind of think about how much effort it went into each of these episodes that you were on, even the smaller shows. You know, honestly, especially the smaller shows, because they're more likely to not have a producing team doing all of that. You want to make sure that you're showing them that there is some level of gratitude beyond just the thank you note that you send, and you should be sending a thank you note after each of your podcast episodes. Beyond that, that you actually want to help them promote their show. That is a huge piece of this. It is not just showing up. Like, I definitely booked a sales call in the comments from one of the reels that I posted about a show that I was on. And I think she closed. So let's be real here. There's opportunity ripe for the picking if you want it. So being a memorable podcast guest is someone who shows up prepared. Someone who shows up prepared as if it were a keynote opportunity, as if they were speaking in front of hundreds or thousands of people. Because guess what? It is, and you are. So if you want to actually learn how to transform your podcast interviews into keynote speaking worthy experiences, honey, you don't want to miss the masterclass I'm leading, your first 5-figure podcast guest. I was about to say experience. Guest feature. Good Lord. I'm hosting that on August 20th, and I cannot wait to be in that room. We're going to be cutting up. I know it. It always happens. It's always a party, and I'm not saying that to like, oh, it's a party. You go in there, it's dry. Clearly, you can tell by my personality, we're not going to be having a dry conversation. And I certainly don't want this to be another situation where you come in, you take these great notes like, oh, this is so pretty, color coordinated, all the things, and don't do nothing with it. We're not having that. So if you show up, make sure you're showing up to take action. Make sure that you're showing up to genuinely, now visibility not being the ultimate goal. Visibility is one thing. Being found is one thing. Being chosen, that's the rub. So here's to being chosen. Here's to being found in the way that you want to be found and chosen, because you're showing up as your authentic self, as the expert that you are, using the language that only you can use, because you are uniquely you. Until next time, and I'm going to keep signing off with this, I think, because I love this idea. Remember that your voice has the power to move money. You can either move it toward you or away from you. It's your choice.